All right, so we're at the hour. I will go ahead and get us started because we have an amazing conversation today. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Maddie Fun's Community Conversations. So happy you could be with us today. I'm one of your hosts, Sheila Kukan, and I'm excited to be back for October with my co-host, Rachel Ray Williams. Rachel Ray is from Detroit, Michigan, and is a human animal well-being professional that fosters a culture of community-centered solutions. She believes in building pathways to equitable pet adoption and pet care that results in strengthening the human and animal bond. Rachel Ray celebrates over 17 years of experience and has a proven track record of being a community-focused leader. She strives to connect people to resources that can build confident, solution-driven leaders and mentors. Please join me in welcoming back Rachel Ray.
Hi, that's cool. Thank you. Love the intro. Love it, love it, love it. Here. See. So we have a great community convo here, and we are so happy to be joined by Janelle Griffith today. Janelle is a nonprofit leader with nearly a decade of experience in community engagement, organizational development, and animal welfare, with a public health degree in the University of South Florida. She began advocating against domestic violence and later managed programs that educated communities on the issue. Since 2015, Janelle has advanced animal welfare initiatives including creating a neonatal program that saves thousands of lives of kittens and puppies. While driving diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI efforts in the industry, she has fostered over 280 animals and serves as a board member of Canella's Opportunity Council, strategic advisor for the Orphan Kitten Club, and the program leader for NAAAP Tampa Bay, and an advisory committee member for Spark. Skilled in project management, strategic planning, and public speaking, Janelle thrives on building partnerships and leading meaningful change.
Thank you so much, Rachel Ray. And I do want to share, folks, today's community conversation includes references to domestic violence that some viewers might find difficult or disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. If you or a loved one are experiencing domestic violence, help is available via the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, and that is 7233. Please note that unless explicitly stated by a presenter, we are not licensed mental health professionals. The information provided in these sessions should not be considered medical or psychological advice. If you are seeking mental health support or treatment, we recommend consulting with a qualified healthcare provider. Always prioritize professional guidance for any health-related decisions. And please know we honor diverse forms of healing and encourage individuals to explore care that aligns with their values, culture, and personal well-being.
I'm going to go ahead and drop the question of the day. We're a little bit out of order today, and that's on me. But I'm going to go ahead and drop the question of the day in there just to get us going. The question of the day is, what do you do to facilitate change during seasons? So, what do you do to help you transition from one season to the next? Oh,
I live in
decorate.
Florida, so there's no
Good.
season.
I was going to say the same thing. I look at photos of
It just stays warm, and then it's a little less warm, and then I'm like, cool.
I usually change my hair. I'm like, I go from braids to like straight hair, and then like that's usually my hair follows the season. So whatever the seasons are on, that's usually what I'm on.
Ooh, I like the cooking different meals, even though
Mm,
the weather's hot. I guess I could have stews and stuff.
it's good to turn the AC up,
Yep.
down.
Good.
Ooh, pumpkin spice. Yep, pumpkin spice season. So please keep these rolling in. These are fun ideas, especially for those of us who don't really have seasons. And we also, for any national updates, please go ahead and drop them in the chat as well. But I know we can probably go ahead and get started, Janelle, if you're ready.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you guys so much for the wonderful introduction. As I stated, my name is Janel Griffith. This session is supporting someone experiencing domestic violence. I will tell you, normally when I do a presentation like this, it's a lot longer because obviously there's a lot of intricacies to this. Um, However, this is so a little bit shorter, so I might be talking a little fast. And I also really encourage you, if you don't know anything about domestic violence, if you haven't taken like a domestic violence 101, anything like that, I would highly encourage you to do that first. I did a presentation a few months ago, but you don't even have to watch that presentation. Go to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, go anywhere that will show, and understand the intricacies again of domestic violence. Actually, in that QR code down there, if you scan it, that actually goes to the National Domestic Violence Hotline. So I always like to give a trigger warning because obviously this is very sensitive content. Some things might come up for people, and I think it's really important that you take care of yourself. So if you have to step away, step away. So I propose a question, and maybe people can start putting it in the chat. How do we support survivors? How do we create change? What is some things that kind of come to mind when that question is asked? Listen, believe them, moral support. Any others? Listening is always a really good one. Anymore? Oh, animal therapy. Mm-hmm. Support them the way they want to be supported. And avoid the question, why do you stay? That's always a big one. Being patient. Patience is a very patience and virtue, and it's something, yes. Um, usually when I would give this presentation, I would kind of jump into supporting survivors, but I was actually been thinking about this a lot more. And I am switching it to, I think, what I feel. Maybe other people may not 100% agree, but I personally feel is the number one way that we can support survivors and how we can create change. And that's holding offenders accountable. This is a really big part that I think it does get brought up quite often, but it doesn't get brought up enough, is that we have to hold the abuser accountable. We often, and I understand way back in the day, when domestic violence organizations first started, it was an underground thing, right? It was making phone calls, it's very secretive. And I understand why that started, right? And so it was really focusing on the survivor. But now I think we've gotten to a time where we have a lot more organizations and access available. We need to start holding offenders accountable. That is how we stop domestic violence. So I kind of wanted to start more in understanding people who abuse, right? Is there a box in my screen? No, okay. Sometimes the picture or the image gets in the way. So one of the things I wanted people to start and understand from the beginning. So Lundy Bancroft, he's somebody who worked with survivors, or not survivors, sorry, abusers for over a decade. So he was actually working with abusers. And I was watching this really wonderful presentation, which I'll put in the resources. And he talks about how this is not a mental health issue. And I think people really, really need to understand that, because not everybody with a personality disorder who have mental health issues are abusers. So we can't fall back onto this notion that it is just a mental health thing, right? Do I think that there's a correlation? Yeah, of course there's a correlation, but is it a cause? Absolutely not. This is learned over time, and it's unhealthy societal views. And I really like Lundy made this point, and I will think I'll continue to use this. It's almost like saying being a racist is a mental health issue. It's not a mental health issue, it's your viewpoint. And it's something deeply ingrained in you. Maybe you've learned it when you were growing up, and it's been something in your head, and it's something that you can change your thought process on. They feel superior. Many factors contribute to this. Again, how they're raised, maybe what they view in their life. There's many, many factors. But it is something learned. And I think the important part when we're talking about holding abusers accountable is that society plays a really big role in this, right? Society plays a huge role in why abusers continue to perpetuate harm. And it can go from gender roles to not teaching healthy relationships. I think one of the things that we as a society always fail on is we don't teach enough what a healthy relationship looks like, right? We always want to talk about things that are like, oh, that's bad. People shouldn't do this. People shouldn't do this. But how many conversations do we actually have about healthy relationships and what a healthy relationship looks like? And also gender roles play a really big one into this. And I also think gender roles hurt, and like misogyny and stuff hurt not only just women, but it also hurts men, right? I've seen men who will sit here and say they want to be stay-at-home dads and, be stay-at-home fathers, not have to work. And men and women alike will attack those men and be like, that's not a man's job. So our society plays a huge role in what is influencing in our viewpoints. And this is where it leads to distorted views, right? Their views are so deeply ingrained and they truly believe that they are right. Obviously, we're in a highly charged political climate. And I think that a lot of people can understand that there are people who are like, I am right no matter what. Well, that's kind of how the abuser feels. They are right no matter what, and they haven't really been challenged. So they sit here and think that the way I view things is correct. They believe in the power imbalance. They believe they have to have power and control over that person. And that's the only way that they can maintain whatever facade that they need to have, is they have to have that power and control. They believe their feelings matter more than their partner. Lundy had this conversation with an abuser, and he talked about this in his presentation, where he was physically strangling his wife, and she fought back. And the abuser came to him and said, I can't believe she hurt me. I can't believe she scratched me. How dare she do something like that? And Lundy was like, you were strangling her. She has every right to fight back. And he goes, no, she doesn't. It is such a deeply ingrained, distorted viewpoint that they don't understand. They are defining reality. People who abuse, this is such an important thing to understand, is they build a public image. They create an image for themselves and control the narrative around that, right? And when I talk about manipulation and how abusers will manipulate, they manipulate the people around them as well. It is really, really, really important to create this public image because it makes the victim, one, second guess themselves, and it makes people around them second guess the victim, right? It makes them go, well, that person is so nice. What do you mean they're doing abusive behaviors at home? I don't understand. And I will tell you, it is such a key part to have this public image and who they are. And this is why I always say, just because you didn't experience abuse and harm from an abuser does not mean that they're not an abuser. They can keep this image up for a long period of time. I was just at a domestic violence awareness event. When I was sitting at the table, the woman next to me asked, how long can people keep this mask up? And I said, a long time. Years, forever. Maybe the mask to the public, they'll keep up forever. Maybe people in the public, or maybe their friends and family might hear a few things that are like a little off the cuff, but they'll keep up this image for as long as they need to. Remember, this helps them control the narrative around their victims. Change requires holding them accountable. I will go back on this over and over and over and over and over again. It requires holding them accountable. And they need to hear it from several places. And this is why this is a societal issue. This is not domestic violence is usually treated as a private issue, right? This is just an intimate family thing. But I will tell you, domestic violence always spills out into our society. It'll spill out into the workforce. It'll spill out into the schools. It'll spill out everywhere. It is not a private family issue. But they need to hear it from several places. They need to hear it from family. They need to hear it from friends. They definitely need to hear it from the justice system. They need to hear it from mentors. Society as a whole, we need to start holding abusers accountable. They need to hear from coworkers. They need to hear from everybody. How they think needs to change. This is not just about their emotions, right? I'm sad sometimes. Their thought process needs to completely change. This is why it's such a deep-rooted views, right? And it doesn't change overnight. And this is why they need to hear it several times, right? Over and over and over again. Another really important thing to understand is not all people who abuse physically or sexually harm. People really need to understand this because the traditional view of domestic violence is the picture with the bruise, the black eye, or the bruises. And that's not what domestic violence is, right? This is a power and control tactic. People use verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse. They'll use economic abuse. They'll use any type of thing to maintain power and control. A batterer can be somebody that puts the fear of physical harm into somebody. So a batterer, the term batterer doesn't mean because somebody physically harms somebody. It means that you're putting in fear that they will physically harm you, right? If somebody looks you dead in your face and says, I could kill you right now, and I will bury your body and nobody will find you. What does that do to your body, right? You feel that fear, you feel that tension, right? That is putting you into physical fear for your life. They thrive because of the shame and the blame. They love the shame and the blame. They blame and they shame their victims. But also, this is why it's really important if we're talking about helping and supporting people as who are survivors, is that we don't shame and blame them either, because you might as well just high five the abuser, because now you're working together to keep that victim where they are. And I will always repeat this, not physically harming someone does not make them any less dangerous. This is super important to understand, because people think, oh, well, if they're physically harming somebody, sexually harming somebody, that's the most violent. Yeah, violence could escalate, but I also want to make sure that people understand is it's the power and the control that really is what they're craving and what they have. And I have heard many, many stories of people who have left their abuser, who were physically, or not physically, but verbally, emotionally, psychologically abusive, never once harmed them, never once put the hand on them. Maybe they put a threat into fear of them. But once the abuser lost power and control, they couldn't wrap their head around it. Remember, they have distorted views, and they ended up murdering their partner. As a society, we don't have a lot of great interventions for offenders, but also offenders have to make sure that they take the initiative to do it. And that's the other hard part about this, right? There are better intervention and prevention programs. They are available everywhere, but they're not very widespread. And I think we could do a lot better at that. I will tell you, most of them are court mandated. So abusers usually don't show up unless it's court mandated. And even then, sometimes abusers will just go through the motions so that way they can get out of it. And this is not a counseling session. This is really important to understand. This is focusing on accountability. These programs focus on healthy relationships, nonviolent behaviors, but they also really focus on accountability. And you can call the hotline. Again, scan that QR code. You can call the hotline, because that's what the hotline is there for. It's not just for survivors. It's not just people experiencing domestic violence. It's for anybody who wants more information about domestic violence. And that includes batterer intervention programs. Individual counseling. I think one thing, if you're in a relationship, obviously with an abuser, you want to think, well, we go to couples counseling. Well, no, it's really important that the person has individual counseling and therapy. And the reason why is because in couples counseling, the abuser could still have control over the narrative in that counseling session. The victim may not feel safe to fully express what is happening. So this is why it's really important to refocus on the individual, right? And then you need to find someone who specializes in power and control behavior and holding people accountable. It can't just be an emotional thing. And I will say this, Lundy Buncroft, he also mentioned, he goes, I always say that if you send an abuser to therapy, all you're going to do is have a happy abuser. They're going to have a good frame of their emotions, but they'll still be abusing because they haven't been held accountable. They need to reframe their mindset. And again, this is not just about feelings or emotions. Now, I will guarantee you, almost everybody knows somebody who is an offender, who is probably perpetuating harm. And there is ways that we can address them directly. And again, this is how we hold people accountable as a society, family and friends. I know there's a lot of family members who will know that their brother, their sister, or somebody is being abusive, and they feel this fear to bring it up to them. But remember, if you feel a little scared of bringing up their behavior, can you imagine what their victim feels? One, you should only do it if you feel safe, right? That's a really big one. There are obviously layers to this, and there are some abusers who are extremely violent. And you only want to do this if you feel safe, and only talk to the person when they're calm. Don't do this right in the middle of like a really heated argument, or when they're kind of just raging and going crazy, right? You don't want to argue or confront them with judgment or anger, which is very difficult, right? Because obviously, if somebody's perpetuating harm, you're like, what are you doing? But if you go with judgment, if you go with anger, if you get in their face, you start screaming at them, maybe that abuser will sit here and listen and listen and listen and take that and then go home and take that out on their victim. So this is why it's important when we have these conversations, we're in a calm state of mind. We're not coming with judgment. We're all coming from a place of, I just want everybody to feel safe. Choose the right time and place. Obviously, maybe bachelor weekend is not the time to bring up if someone's an abuser. You want to do a right time and place, or maybe private. Don't let them blame other people for their abusive behavior. This is a really big part of accountability, right? Because the first thing that an abuser will do is say, well, whoa, they did this to me, right? If you're like, when we talk about, I skipped the be clear and direct. If you said to them, hi, I'm personally concerned because I saw you call your partner stupid and ugly, and I just feel like that's really harmful behavior. The first thing the abuser will probably do will say, well, they called me stupid and ugly first. And it's like this back and forth. And I'm always like, how old are you? You're not a child. Let's grow up. But also, you have to be like, well, it doesn't make it right for you to say it back. We're all in control of our own behaviors. Offer to help them find ways to change their behaviors. And if it's not just therapy, it's whatever. I mean, sometimes domestic violence is not caused by substance abuse or by mental health issues, but sometimes it can exacerbate those symptoms. So maybe if we have to get through the substance abuse, we have to help with the mental health issues first, let's focus on that. And then we could start working on the abusive behavior. Always keep focus on safety and well-being for their family. And if they deny, minimize, repeat, that abuse is never okay. And again, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline. They have a lot of information and guidance on how to actually address abusers. So understanding what victims experience, if you do your DV 101 class, the power and control wheel will be there. And I highly, 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 highly encourage you to go back and do any type of DV 101 and understand fully the power and control wheel. Because at the center of domestic violence, it is all about power and control. On the outside, yes, they can use physical and sexual violence to maintain that power and control, but all of those things inside of the power and control wheel is actually more of what they use opposed to just physical and sexual violence, right? So we're not going to go into all of them because we don't have time, but we're talking about coercion, threats, we're talking about intimidation, we're talking about economic abuse. They will use children and pets as a way to keep them there. They'll minimize, deny, and blame. They will gaslight people up the wazoo, and emotional abuse. So I always start this when I would do this presentation. I used to be the community educator for a domestic violence place. Now I just volunteer there. I always would start with yourself. You have to start with yourself. Before you approach anybody experiencing domestic violence, please start with yourself. And one, have a clear understanding of what domestic violence is and the intricacies of it. It is a lot more than what surface level people think, and you're at the tip of the iceberg. We need to go deeper and really understand it. And why that's important is because that's how you're going to know how to help a survivor, right? You need to check in with yourself, with your emotional bandwidth and your bandwidth in general. If you're sitting here like, it is kitten season and I am emotionally bankrupt because if I see one more kitten, I'm going to cry, and you're just not at that level, then yeah, I mean, I think it'd take a second and be like, can I emotionally handle this, right? Is this something? Because if a survivor decides to finally disclose to you what's happening and you're like, but kittens, and you just kind of shut them down, it's going to be really hard for that survivor to then speak up again, right? And now we're going to tap into our empathy. And when I say tap into our empathy, I mean, we're tapping into our empathy. I mean, we are tapping into that empathy. We are tapping into that empathy. The deepest throes of our empathy. Compassion, patience. Patience is really, really important. And our deep listening skills, right? And you have to leave the judgment behind. One of the biggest things I like to tell people is you are not the hero of this story. That's really hard for people to hear because when we talk about helping others, we talk about helping animals, right? I feel like we know in the animal welfare, we have a lot of people who are like a little bit of savior complex. We want to go and help and save everything, but you're not the hero of this story. You're not. You're not going to be able to swoop in and save the day. As much as you want to do it, you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to fix it. This is not something you just fix. This is not like let me write down my little checklist and then I'm going to check off all the things and it's all going to be done and it's going to be fixed. No, you are not in control, which is very difficult for people who like to have the control. And I also want to point out when I talk about control, what does the abuser use to keep their victim there? Power and control. So if we start going in trying to control the situation, we're just doing another person who's controlling them. No, they cannot just leave. No, they cannot just leave. Let's all repeat that to ourselves right now. No, they cannot just leave. And go ahead and put your earrings back in because we ain't fighting no one. And this is really important because if my friend came to me and told me that their partner was abusing them, these earrings would want to come out. And I'm like, we're going to fight them. But you can't do that. Not in a domestic violence situation. You can actually put the victim in more harm if you're going to be like, let's just jump them and fight them and do all of that kind of stuff. This is all about calculation, right? We have to be able to be methodical in how we're going to approach this. We have to have a plan. This is not just fighting somebody. Starting the conversation. No, this conversation is going to be hard. Is it going to be difficult? Is it going to be uncomfortable? Is this something that people don't know really want to talk about? Yeah, of course. So just know that it's going to be difficult. Ask to go out to lunch, coffee, go walk the dog in the park. You know what I'm saying? Just do anything that's somewhere away from the home or the offender. Make sure this is a private area. So if you're going to go to like lunch or coffee, make sure this is not a place where the waiter is going to come and interrupt you every 5 seconds, because it's going to make it very difficult. Maybe just like a little really quiet coffee shop in the back corner where you guys can just have some private time. Or even, like I said, walk the dog. And make sure you have enough time to talk at length. This is not something you pencil into your very busy schedule and you're like, you got 30 minutes to tell me what's happening in your domestic violence relationship. No, you need to be able to sit there, take time. There's going to be a lot of pausing. There's going to be a lot of reflecting. Don't label it. A lot of times people are not ready to hear those words, domestic violence or abuse. And some people don't even recognize that they're in a domestic violence situation. And being called a survivor, they're like, survivor of what? What do you mean? I'm not experiencing domestic violence. This is why we're going to focus on behaviors and patterns of behavior and safety instead of labeling things, right? And I always say you want to start with your I statements. It's really important. This is focusing on I. If you start using you, it becomes very accusatory. You are experiencing this. No. I notice that sometimes I'm using just a random name. So if this is your name, I'm sorry. I notice that sometimes John will scream at you and call you really horrible names. Does this happen a lot? Pause. Please let them answer before we go to the second question. How does that make you feel? I'm concerned about your safety, and I was just wondering if that's okay, if that's something we can talk about, if that's okay. I'm so glad you told me about this. How can I help you? How can I support you? I noticed lately that you've been not going out as much. Remember, isolation is a really big part of domestic violence. Is everything okay? And if you ever want to talk, I'm here for you. And one of my favorite ones is, I promise I believe you. I won't judge you for your choices or experiences. I just care about you and your safety. And somebody actually asked this question at another domestic violence event I was at. And they're like, what if you've brought it up before? And they're just like, what are you talking about? Domestic violence does not exist in my purview. Maybe they don't have a clear understanding of what domestic violence is. So I recently read, watched, or heard about this, and it could be something about domestic violence. And please, if it's something that says this is domestic violence, don't share that. Maybe it could be something like, oh, I'm going to this training. I don't really know what it's about. Would you like to go with me? Something like that. Key things to remember: active listening. We're putting on our active listening skills. And active listening is a skill. We're not listening to hear, or we listen to hear. We don't listen to not to speak, right? This is very, very important. We're not waiting for our turn to talk. We have to actually listen and digest. Make the time, carve out the time, and communicate if time is limited. And I'll say, like, if you're cleaning kennels, right, and then somebody, your coworker or somebody close to you comes up to you and starts disclosing what's happening, but in 30 minutes, you have a really important meeting with HR, just communicate that. Thank you so much for feeling comfortable enough to bringing this to me. I do want to let you know, like, in 30 minutes, I have that really important meeting I have to do. But after that, I would love to continue this conversation. And until I have to leave, let's continue to talk. I think over communicating, it's really important to let people know, like, if you just didn't communicate that at all and you're like, well, 30 minutes, I got to go, they're going to feel like they've been dismissed. But leave them with your body, face, and words. I don't have a good poker face. And so this one, it was a challenge for me too. And I have to do this one. Believe in your body. You can't be like, they did what now? Are you sure? Because even if your words are like, I believe you, they're going to be like, do you believe it? Validate all their feelings. There's going to be a wide range of emotions. Remember, and if you do the domestic violence 101, love is the foundation that abuse is built on. This was started with love, right? The abuser knows this. The abuser knows all of these tactics that they use. This is starting with love. There was a goodness there at some point, because that's how they reel their victims in, right? They don't reel them in with just abuse. They have to show love, compassion, all of these things that they can mimic these behaviors to them, right? So remember, there's going to be this, like, maybe they're hopeful, like maybe they'll change one day, or I do still love them. There was good at some point. What happened, right? So understand there's going to be a wide range of emotions. Father the lead on how they speak about the abuser in the situation. And this is really, really important, because remember, sometimes people aren't ready to hear those things. So if they're like, the situation that happened, and you're like, you mean when the person hit you? No. That's not what we're saying. We're saying, when the situation happened, how did you feel? What was going on? If they're like, yeah, well, Sally did this, and this, and you're like, you mean your abuser? No. We're saying Sally, mimicking the behavior or mimicking the language that they use. Remember, this is a process. This is not happening overnight, right? This is not one fail swoop movement. We're not going to just leave, like we always like to say. This is a process. This is a journey. And even if they do leave, there's still this long journey ahead of them. Mistakes people often make when we're approaching somebody experiencing domestic violence is you focus on the person. Again, we're not focusing on the person and being like, Sally's a horrible person. We're focusing on the behavior that the person is exhibiting. And it is very tempting to join in on the bassing sessions. I think everybody's probably been there. I know I've been there. If they come to you and they're mad, right? They're upset. Obviously, something happens. It might be so easy to jump in and be like, I told you they ain't nothing, and all of these kinds of things. And you want to jump in and just like start bashing on that person too. But remember, when they're not angry, the survivor is not angry anymore. And now they're back to, well, now this person's being really loving to me. They're going to look at you and be like, oh, they really bashed them pretty hard. And so they're not going to be sure they can come and talk to you. Don't make things harder. If you promise to do something, follow through. This is one of the most important things. I know sometimes things happen, obviously, extenuating circumstances can happen, but if you make a promise, follow through. Do not ask a ton of questions. This is not an interrogation, right? You are there using your I statements, just listening. Never underestimate the abuser. People underestimate abusers all of the time because nobody, and I understand this completely, nobody wants to think that they could be harmed or killed, right? Nobody wants to go there. Nobody wants to go that the person that they love could do something like that to them, but never underestimate what an abuser can do to their victim or you, especially one that feels they are losing power and control, especially when they feel like they're losing power and control. And do not provoke the abuser, right? Another mistake people make is judging. Obviously, this is very difficult. It's understandable, right? If you see you're sitting on the outside looking in, it's easy to quick to go to judgment. And oftentimes I think when people feel powerless, they want to take that control and they want to start using excuses because in our heads, we just can't possibly wrap our head around, like, how can this possibly happen? You know, why would they like still be in a relationship like this? That's our first judgments, right? We're going into these judgments and I get it. It's totally understandable. But remember, this is when we have to tap back into our empathy and understand where they're coming from. You always want to avoid saying these hurtful phrases. I mean, there's a lot of hurtful phrases, but these are some of the top ones. I would never let anyone treat me that way. What did you just tell that person? They're letting that abuse happen. If someone treated me like that, you would what? People have to recognize that we never know what we'll do until we're in that situation. Why would you stay? You're just again implying that they're choosing to stay. Just leave. It's not that easy. And if you go to Domestic Violence 101 or Understanding Domestic Violence, you'd understand the multitude of reasons why people can't just leave. And if they didn't love you, they wouldn't be doing all of this, right? That extreme jealousy, driving you everywhere, going through your phone. There are people who have said, well, that means it just shows how much they love you. That's not love. Strategies to help. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I think offering specific help is really important. It could be something from like, obviously, if the person's not working, can I look up some job boards for you? Can I look some jobs? Can I look at some of your skills? Maybe can I look over your resume? Offer to pick up their kids, maybe run some errands, offer to go to the courthouse with them if they're wanting to do a protection order, take in their pets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing to remember is this is about offering support, not forcing your help. You're not like kicking down the door, again, swooping in to save the day and being like, hi, I'm going to go ahead and pick up your kids. You're asking, would this be helpful? Another key thing is when people always ask is when to call the police. This is a very, very, very delicate topic. And I will always say, if you see physical violence happening, if you hear or see physical violence happening, physical violence is happening, call 911. Police are the most effective way to remove immediate danger, but they're not going to be great if maybe there's an argument, if there's coercive control, or even sometimes if there's threats. Remember, there is a lot of fear associated with calling the police, especially in certain communities. And not only that, a police report will have both people's names on it. So maybe they're worried that their job is going to see this police report because it could be public record, right? Maybe they're worried about their family and acquaintances knowing. They're scared of being discriminated against. There's a lot of people who are really, really scared to call the police because, one, they don't think they're going to believe them. They're scared they're going to be attacked by the police themselves. There's a lot of fear with calling the police. And not only that, calling can make violence worse for the victim. Why? If the police show up, they can't prove there's any harm, and they don't take away the abuser, the police leave. And now the abuser is left with their victim. Remember, it's violence. Physical violence is happening. And I will say you have to look up your state code. In certain states, threats of violence can be an arrestable offense, but not in every state. Remember, this officer must be able to determine enough probable cause to arrest somebody. And there's some wonderful police officers who get it, who understand. And I've also seen a lot of police officers, because I watch a lot of body cam footage, who will literally go through the domestic violence checklist. Do you feel like they could kill you? Have they ever harmed you? So remember, it really, really, really just depends on the police officer. Safety plan, safety plan, safety plan, safety plan, safety plan, safety plan, safety plan. This is a personalized plan that is meant to improve the safety of the person experiencing abuse. This is especially important if they're thinking about leaving and preparing to leave the abuser. This also extends past after the person has left. There are several factors to consider when creating a safety plan. That's the only QR code that's different. It does take you to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, but it takes you to where I screen recorded over there, a personalized safety plan. A personalized safety plan is really important to understand too, because it caters to that individual and their circumstances. Remember, the chance of violence and homicide from the abuser can greatly increase when the person decides to leave. And some of the most dangerous, actually, it's not some of the most, it is the most dangerous time for a survivor is when they decide to leave. This is where homicide, the chance of homicide, and very, very, very abusive and brutal harm can happen. This is why it's important to safety plan. I had a conversation with somebody before, and they said, safety plan, I don't think he's going to do anything. And I said, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to have a plan in place. We plan a lot of things in life, right? It doesn't hurt to have a plan. And if you never have to use the safety plan, good. But let's just have a plan just in case. So what happens if they don't leave or they go back? One, it's not your fault. I know a lot of people will probably blame themselves that they didn't do enough, they should have tried harder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Remember, this is a very, very complex situation. It is not your fault, and don't blame yourself. Lundy Bancroft also mentioned this part, which I really thought was important. Sit and reflect with yourself for a second about what it takes to leave a non-abusive relationship. If you've been married for a long time, if you're living together, think about all the things when you're about to leave somebody, not because they're being abusive, but maybe the relationship's not working out, all the things that go into it. One, you think you deserve better, right? There's something better out there for me. If you've been living together, money, it's very expensive to live separately, especially in today's economy. You have to have some sort of self-esteem, right? I'm pretty good looking. I could go find me another boo. Social contact with friends and family. When we're talking about leaving our partner or leaving in a relationship, who do we usually call? Our friends. Hey, so I've been thinking about this. This has been really weighing on my mind. And belief that you can manage life on your own. Now think about all the tactics that abusers use to maintain power and control over their victim. They have told them that they will never find anything better. They have control over all of the money. They have belittled them. They have chipped away at the core and essence of who they are, right? They have isolated them. So now they have nobody to talk to. And they have told them, you will never be able to live without me. This is why it can take up to 7 times before they leave for good. And don't close that door. That door could literally be a lifeline. I understand this is difficult. I understand this is frustrating. And on the last one, I say stay tuned. Stay in tune with your own mental health and your emotions. Obviously, if your bandwidth has completely depleted and it is really vicarious trauma is a real thing, you could simply say, listen, I love you. I support you. I always will be here for you. I'm just so concerned about your safety. And right now, I might have to take a step back. I didn't.
Such an amazing speaker, Janelle. We just love to hear from you. You just bring something to it that you just have your je ne sais quoi. So we have some great questions in the chat that we're gonna go through. We're just gonna give everybody like a couple seconds to, just regain themselves and come back here. And I'm gonna pull up some questions for you.
Awesome. And I also will tell people I'm in the forum, I'm going to put all of those resources that I have.
Mhm. So the first question that we have is from Veronica. She said on the power control wheel, did it include when it is mental and emotional and not physical violence or sexual abuse? Does it still count as abuse?
Absolutely. Emotional abuse is a huge part of maintaining power and control. And I've actually heard a lot of survivors say that even when the bruises and the broken bones heal, it's that emotional and a psychological abuse that lingers with them for years to come.
Thank you. And then we have another question from Marion. What are your thoughts or experiences with Red Rover, which is what I read is meant to help domestically abused and their pets? Do you have any information on those folks?
I can put them as a resource. Well, I will tell you that they do offer a lot of grants. This is what I know about Red Rover. They're offering a lot of great grants and actually going into domestic violence organizations and helping them set up programs so that way animals can come with their survivor.
I'm just looking through and see if we have any other questions. Please throw them in the chat if you have any questions, and definitely join us on the forum. I know sometimes when you hear some new information or information for the first time, it takes a second to kind of figure out what kind of questions you may have. So as you simmer on this topic, definitely move those questions onto the forum, and we'll be love to like continue this conversation, talk. And if you guys have had positive experiences with organizations through grants or just through support, that you would like to include, definitely throw them in the chat, take them to the forum. I know that we had another question about organizations, so I'm just looking to see if somebody else has. Unbertha was one of the websites that I used to find local help based on my zip code. So I did throw that in there earlier, but Janelle has some great resources.
I also will say, too, the National Domestic Violence Hotline has a list of all of the local ones. You just put in your state and your city, and it'll have a list of all the local domestic violence organizations. I will point this out, though, with a lot of domestic violence organizations, and I will say that we are progressing and hopefully moving forward. A lot of them focus on women, and we do know that obviously the percentage wise, women are usually the higher percentage of victims, and cisgendered men are the highest percentage of perpetrators. However, what I think, and this is why I take a lot of gender language out of when I do presentations about this, is because it can happen to anybody. Anybody can be an abuser, and abuse can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter your socioeconomic status, it doesn't matter your political affiliation, it doesn't matter your ethnicity, it doesn't matter anything. It can happen to anybody. And I do think that if you look up a domestic violence organization and you see the word women's organization, even if you're a male experiencing domestic violence, I would still encourage you to reach out. Sometimes they are 501c3s and they lock that name in like 20 years ago, and it's really hard to change the name.
I put the forum question in the chat, but I'll just go ahead and say it aloud just so everybody has it. Why do you think society often concentrates on what victims should have done instead of examining and holding accountable abusers for their abusive behavior? And I think that's something that you kind of talked about during this presentation, just really understanding why things are happening to better support the victim, and using, and like you said, we have to hold them accountable. Like that's part of the solution, is holding perpetrators accountable.
And I will add to this, and I think this is completely understandable. I think it's human nature. when we look at victims and we look at survivors and we question the tactics and things and choices that they've made, it helps us feel like we can prevent it.
Mm.
Like it'll never happen to me if I just don't do what they did. But the thing is abusers are master manipulators and they can get anybody. They're really good at what they do. They know how to isolate their victims. They know how to get people to fall in love with them. They know how to do all of these things. And I think as a society, if we feel like we can do XYZ, then it'll never happen to us. And this is why it's so important to hold abusers accountable for their behavior, because they're the ones choosing to abuse. They're making the conscious choice to do that.
So many important takeaways, Janelle. And my pup Zeba helped me out of a situation 10 years ago, and I'm just sitting here wishing I had this conversation then. And I'm so grateful that we have you here today. And hopefully we can continue this important conversation and really intersecting human and animal well-being. So thank you so much. I mean, I was nodding my head the whole time. I'm gonna need a massage or something because it was just like one thing after another. This was brilliant. There's a lot of love for you in the chat, so I'll make sure you have those notes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Janelle. This is a really important conversation, and I hope we all continue together on Maddie's Pet Forum. Thank you, Rachel Ray, for serving as my co-host today, and I'll be back with you next week. We have a great conversation with the team from Animal Welfare League of Arlington on bridging services, strengthening communities. So it's another wonderful conversation. And if you are interested in hosting, or if anyone here would like to join as a speaker, I know Janelle is going to be some, tough act to follow, but we all have brilliance to share and important things to share in this community. So to absolutely welcome that, let us know on Maddie's Pet Forum. And thank you all, and truly thank you, Janelle.
Thank you, everybody.